Premium luggage that's not just an accessory, but a companion on your journey. Briggs & Riley believes in luggage so deeply, they've crafted it to last for life. Guaranteed. At Briggs & Riley, any broken part will be repaired. Every stitch, every wheel, even every zipper. With our new line of Simpatico luggage, you can pack 34% more. Then compress your luggage so it fits perfectly into your overhead bin. Briggs & Riley. Travel uninterrupted. Learn more and choose your color at briggs-riley.com.
Hey there, welcome into the latest episode of the Show Before the Show podcast, the official podcast of minor league baseball. Tyler Mon, Sam Dykstra, Benjamin Hill. No time to waste today. Not vamping, not tiptoeing around some nonsense. We're getting right in. Dudes, what is your favorite breakfast cereal?
Let me give that a 15-minute ponder.
I don't know why that was.
Before I just say Reese's Puffs because I want to be a kid again.
Reese's Puffs.
Reese's
Ben?
Puffs.
Oh man. I didn't have much sugar cereal growing up, so I got a soft spot for like regular Cheerios,
Okay.
Crispix, Corn Chex. Keeping it simple.
Can I just say though, like as I've aged, Raisin Bran tastes amazing.
Dude, I will say I'm a fan of some Raisin Bran. I actually just had a conversation yesterday with our friend and yours, Josh Jackson. Josh was like, when Ella, his wife, is like, when Ella's out of town, there's like a non-zero chance that I'll just eat Raisin Bran for every single meal. I'm a Cinnamon Toast Crunch guy, by the way. So with that, we wrap up this week's episode of the show. Now, welcome in. We've got so much to get to this week. The Major League trade deadline is in the rearview mirror. We're going to talk about that. And we've got tons more from the world of minor league baseball to get to. Thanks for hanging out with us. Wherever you found us, you can get in touch with the show, podcast at milb.com, and leave us a rating and a review and all those fun things. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts as we turn the corner into August of this minor league baseball season here in 2024. And Benjamin Hill, fresh back from a road trip through the cradle of minor league baseball, North Carolina. Ben, when you got to Kinston, you sent me a picture from Granger Stadium that made my heart swell 10 sizes. But there is not much cooler than being able to check out a whole bunch of ballparks in North Carolina in July. How was the trip?
Yeah, man, I tell anyone who listens that the best state in our great nation for minor league baseball is North Carolina. Not just minor league baseball, capital M minor league baseball, but summer collegiate, independent. There are more options and a greater diversity of options in that state than anywhere else. So was happy to get back to North Carolina. And yeah, Tyler, like you mentioned, started in Kinston, North Carolina, home of the Down East Wood Ducks, Rangers affiliate in their final season at a ballpark built in 1949. So, 75 years old. We've in my career, in our time covering baseball, we've seen baseball leave Kinston when the Kinston Indians left after the 2011 season. It came back in 2017 in the form of the Down East Wood Ducks. But after this season, it is done for good because this ballpark has a lot of charm, but given the market and the ballpark and current minor league baseball facility standards, I don't see how affiliated ball would ever return. So the future of this ballpark is up in the air. The team itself, as we talked about last week, the Down East Wood Ducks are moving to Spartanburg and becoming the Hub City Spartanburgers next year. They'll go up one level to the South Atlantic League and High A, while the Hickory Crawdads go one level below to the Carolina League. But that's neither here nor there right now. Kinston, again, Tyler, as just a classic ballpark in a residential area. I'm looking at my pictures right now. This little white, old, kind of shotgun style, not quite a shack, but a small house right across the street from the ballpark, which kind of speaks that you're in a small town, right in a residential area, the ballpark. They've added a real nice right field group area, party deck, elevated view, and there's room to move on the concourse down the baselines. But at its core, this ballpark is just classic, a grandstand and a covered grandstand, and you watch baseball. And we're all going to miss it when it's gone from the affiliated landscape. A lot of history there, so it's good to be there. Talk to their GM John Clemens for a bit about the difficulty of this season and saying goodbye and the bittersweet nature of this whole thing. course, did some food stuff. My designated eaters, I didn't have designated eaters in Kinston, but it was a couple who were going, Matt and Brittany, who were going to be getting married on the field the next day. So it was like good little minor league baseball story there. Hammed it up with Dude, the duck, the mascot. That's DEWD. His name is an acronym for Down East Wood Duck. And yeah, the whole Down East thing, they don't play in the Down East region of Carolina. And in talking to John Clemens, the GM, he said one of the thoughts, though, is it's not just referencing the Down East portion of North Carolina in order to kind of expand their market. It's also saying like they're representing down east of Raleigh, so however you want to look at it. But Kinston itself, I don't know the population. I don't think there's many more than 20,000 people in that town, so it's a pretty low key environment. Got a couple meals at King's when I was there, famous barbecue spot with the vinegar based North Carolina barbecue. So good to be back. I don't know when I'll be back, but like I said, I hope we've got summer collegiate or something coming into that ballpark. And Tyler and I, we'll go back and once again share our love for Granger Stadium.
We'll eat a whole bunch of Kings. What was the mood? I mean, obviously fans in that area have been through this before, having an affiliated team that moved away, over a decade ago. And as you said, came back in 2017. But what was the mood around, well, we're losing the Wood Ducks, but it's Kinston, North Carolina. I mean, there's going to be baseball there in some form. We don't know what form that will take, but what sort of sense did you get from people?
Well, the people I talked to were, of course, sad about this, feeling bittersweet about the whole season. But also kind of like, hey, we've been through this before and something will be here. And, for the hardcore fans, they're going to keep showing up no matter what it is. But did talk to some interesting people. I talked to one guy, older black gentleman, who said he's been coming to the games there since 1958, and just like, wow,
That is amazing. That ballpark was only like 10 years old at that point.
Yeah. And he said he played games there in school. And even if you can imagine this, different era of minor league baseball, just playing pickup games on the field, just gathering some neighborhood kids and just being like, we're going to go play Granger. Can you imagine that today? Just being like, let's just walk over to the minor league ballpark. And
That's like a dream I've had before.
Yeah, so it was a different era. But yeah, a lot of history there, including some Negro League teams in the early days of the ballpark. Kinston Eagles were one of the teams back, various iterations of that throughout the 50s, 60s. There's the Cleveland affiliation, now the Rangers. A lot of history, a lot to unpack. But yeah, we're coming up on the home stretch of the Foul Well season. Foul Well, Granger Stadium.
That's something that I'm going to need a lot of practice on saying foul well. I have to think through, I think, every vowel in that, every single sound in that statement. And you also moved on to Durham with the Bulls. I mean, that's such an iconic place to see a game at the DBAP. It's not as old as Granger Stadium, obviously. They moved away into a newer place a few years ago, but what was it like being back with the Bulls?
Well, one, to my larger point about like the diversity of locales and atmospheres in North Carolina. Case in point, right there, going from Granger Stadium to Durham Bulls Athletic Park, right there in Durham, even more built up around that area, the quote unquote tobacco district than it had been since the last time I was there. I've always liked Durham. It was my third time there. I think this time it kind of hit me like, man, the question I get more than any other in this job is what's your favorite ballpark? And I never just give one answer, but I've got to start adding Durham just to my short list because, man, does that place pop. It just feels like bigger and larger than life and just colorful and vibrant and great crowds. I was there on a Saturday night. Just like, wow, this is like basically in a lot of ways, the premier franchise in all of minor league baseball, just in terms of the history of the franchise, of course, the pop culture time with the movie that really changed the team's fortunes and helped precipitate their move from the Carolina League to AAA and get that new ballpark built. I can't believe that this ballpark, the DBAP, is almost 30 years old or is 30 years old. It does not seem that old. It's still
no, it looks and feels fresh when you were there.
Yeah, absolutely. But one thing I got to do when I was there through all the high tech stuff, and they even have like some ribbon boards or scoreboards on buildings around the ballpark. This is a ballpark that is really cutting edge in a lot of ways, but they still have a manual scoreboard. So I spent a couple innings back, at the manual scoreboard. in these like in the guts of the stadium behind the outfield, and that was a cool experience. Talked to a guy named Chris Ivy out there who's been doing that job pretty much for the entirety of the ballpark's existence. So that's a cool old school feature. I'll save this story for later because we're already got a lot to talk about, but had by far the most dramatic designated eater session of my life with a lot of ups and downs and twists and turns. So I'll preview that story for some other time. But more drama in a minor league game than I'm used to on my road trips, where usually there's no drama at all in terms of who I'm interacting with and what I'm doing. The only drama is me, mitigating my own anxieties and concerns that I'm not doing my job properly. But yeah, funny little designated eater interlude. But then fireworks after the game, and just thinking they're in the dugout watching the fireworks with the longtime team president Mike Burling, all these players, wives, girlfriends, kids in the dugout as well. The fireworks being right on the field, almost you could kind of feel the heat from it. Just thinking like, man, this place is just killing it. And then if you walk into the team store at any time, just packed all the time, talking to their merchandise director, Brian Wilson, like they just sell so much. And that brand is so popular, of course, locally, but nationally and internationally. So really cool to see, in a lot of ways, minor league baseball at its highest level, not just being AAA, but also just being how a franchise operates and the buy-in from the fan base and like a really vibrant time. So yeah, get to a Durham Bulls game if you haven't been. I shouldn't have let 8 years go by, but that's what happens in this job.
It really is as cool of a place as you'll find in not just minor league baseball, but in baseball as a whole. You also got to hit Greensboro. We, of course, talked about the Grasshoppers' new visual identity earlier this season. So obviously a little bit different looking ballpark these days with new logos and everything else. Greensboro is great, and that's an area I know they've been building up around the ballpark over the last 10 years or so. Take us through the trip to see the Grasshoppers.
Yeah, it was a Sunday afternoon, so it was more low key. Coming from Durham on a Saturday night to Greensboro on a kind of hot, little bit sleepy afternoon was definitely a shift in environment, but certainly some overlap there. Another downtown ballpark, again, even more built up from the last time I went there. When I got to the ballpark, there's this big brick exterior, so I see that, but I'm like, wait, last time I went here, I remember like a big grassy area and an entrance and some like a mascot statue and statues of their iconic ball dogs. I was like, where is that? And then I realized there's this huge building where that used to be, which is like a First National Bank headquarters right there down the first base side. So I think that got rid of that larger kind of entranceway that used to be there. There are ballpark apartments now in the outfield, so that's always cool to see. Every time I've been to a ballpark with ballpark apartments that have views of the field, I always expect there to be just tons of people on the porches, and there usually aren't. And I'm like, why do you live here and you're not just out on the porch watching the game? But I don't know. But it was really cool to see uh yeah, the opportunity to live with a back porch that has a minor league ball game view. I think is really cool. Tyler, like you mentioned, yeah, new identity, or not new identity, but new branding this year, so it seemed fresh on that point. I talked to are you guys familiar with Andy Durham, their longtime broadcaster? You may have heard calls on, through MILB highlights on social media, but, he's been calling games for years. He's an older guy. I don't know, maybe in his 50s, 60s. But he does this home run call where he just kind of tries to hold, like going, gone. I can't do it, but he'll do that around the whole bases. So it's pretty polarizing, but I got to talk about that broadcaster and his unique style. Got the word on a little miniature baseball diamond. They're creating an intersection right outside the ballpark that'll have statues of all their different ball dogs through the year. Master Yogi Berra and Miss Babe Ruth and things of that nature. Designated eater Rob Neal, great dude. A lot of good stuff to eat at the game, including the Connie Mack attack, a foot-long hot dog with pulled pork and bacon bits and mac and cheese, and just one of the most ridiculous items I've seen for a while. Also talked to an usher. What was his name? Rich. Anyway, an usher. I will write about him and I will get all these names right. But he wrote a different joke every half inning on a whiteboard. And at the inning breaks, he would walk down into the stands and share his joke on a whiteboard. I think the one I happened to capture said, what kind of exercise do lazy people do? So he goes down and he holds up this whiteboard with a sign. What kind of exercise do lazy people do? Diddly squats. So he flips over the board and shows that. But he has a
Pretty
new
good.
joke
Pretty good.
every half inning.
Pretty
And,
good. Pretty good.
yeah, those are the kind of guys I like to highlight. An Usher who likes to tell jokes every single half inning throughout every game of for the entire season. That's commitment, and that was great to see as well. So good to be back in Greensboro for sure on a Sunday afternoon.
Beyond Greensboro, Ben, you got to hit the Appy League, and obviously former affiliated teams, now members of a different style of baseball. But checking out the Appy League has got to be cool because you saw these places when they were in their affiliated era as rookie ball teams, and now they are a different iteration in different identities and probably a different energy at the ballpark.
Yeah, first time, after 2020, the Appy League went from, advanced rookie affiliated to summer collegiate. All the teams rebranded because they had previously had their major league club as a team name. So where in the past I visited the Danville Braves, they're in Danville, Virginia, at Dan Daniel Park in Danville, Virginia, Danville Braves. Now they are the Danville Otterbots, a kind of mix of referencing, I guess, local wildlife and technical innovation in the Danville area. Guy who runs that team, Austin Scher, Scher. I knew him when he was with Daytona. He went to Danville, threw himself into that, and he's brought a lot of great energy to that ballpark. Talked to a lot of longtime fans, and the sense I got is like people are pretty happy with the Appy League as it is now. It's not affiliated anymore, but there's a lot of Appy League alums now in affiliated ball, having got drafted after playing in the Appy League and playing at the respective colleges, and so we'll start to see Appalachian League alumni in the major leagues, and I think that will help increase the profile when these teams can point to major leaguers who played in the Appy League. So talk to some of their players, talk to fans. That ballpark is really simple, kind of like a symmetrical parallel layout where it's just like a little grandstand, bleachers on each side, um, external building on each side of the same size. One is kind of a bar group area, one's more kid oriented. So yeah, great to be back there. And then, keeping with the league, went back into North Carolina, saw the Burlington Sock Puppets on a Tuesday night, and it was their last regular season home game of the season. I was expecting it to be fairly low key. There was no ballpark I went to that was more filled in terms of like percentage. It wasn't the biggest crowd because that's a small ballpark, but just they had a huge walk up, and it was just a huge crowd, vibrant. It just felt so alive there. So it was really cool to see how embraced the sock puppets were by the people of Burlington. There's an irony that sometimes that hurts my coverage because when things are a little more low key at a ballpark, it's easier for me to talk to people, get leads on who else to talk to, kind of wander around. But this place was just hopping, just so it was a little hard to do some of my usual things. But spent some time on the roof. It's got one of those old school press boxes up on the roof where you take a really steep ladder to the roof. So the great views up there. They had a guy there I talked to. I don't even know his real name. I think I have it written down somewhere, but he's Whiff. And if you look at him, he looks kind of like Max Patkin, the original clown prince of baseball, or one of the most iconic clown princes of baseball. He calls himself the pirate prince of baseball, and does in-game stuff throughout the game, and real loose and limber and physical pantomime. But he's also a fire breather, a legit fire breather. And so prior to the post-game fireworks, he did a really well orchestrated fire breathing show on the field. And that's just situations like that is where I feel really good about my job and being on the road, just sitting on a Appy League field, watching a fire breather before some fireworks and being like, all is right with the world right now. So, yeah, great energy in Burlington. And yeah, really nice to see how successful that's been. And great to be back in the Appy League. And I hope to keep doing it. I hope to get back in the Appy League and kind of expand my realm to the extent I can, kind of making that aspect up as I go along. Of course, the main goal here is covering affiliated minor league baseball. That's our focus. But anytime we can dip our toes in the water elsewhere, I'm very happy to, for sure.
Yeah, and just to pick up what you were talking about there in terms of the Appy League becoming more high profile. I mean, Jordan Leisure with the Chicago White Sox made the opening day roster, becoming the first Appy Leaguer to make the majors. So we're already
Okay,
seeing
yeah,
that
we
bear
got
fruit.
one. Yeah, we
Yeah.
got one.
They
Yeah.
already got one. And Kalen Culpepper of Kansas State, an Appy League alum, was drafted in the first round earlier in July. I was going to say this month, but now we're in August. But still, so now they've got a first rounder. They've got a major leaguer. I saw Bertie Johnston play there at the Appy League All-Star game. He looks like a future first rounder. The profile of the place, everybody I talked to, from my experiences, it's becoming a bigger deal. And it's cool to see that they're getting the crowds to reflect that.
Yeah, absolutely. My small sample size, both the number of teams and amount of time I spent with the team, small sample size, but I got the sense that the Appy League is doing well and its future is bright, both on an on-field level as well as a fan experience level. So I hope I'm not extrapolating too much in saying that, but yeah, good first impression in this newer era of the Appy League. And what a great environment. Go visit the Appy League if you have any chance to do so, especially because those teams are so close together. You can get a road trip together with fairly minimal travel. I've mentioned this before, but the first time I visited the Appy League in 2016, I stayed in Johnson City for 5 nights because that entire Western Division is so close to each other. Every team's within an hour. So really great chance to explore smaller town America baseball through the Appy League. That's the end of my public service announcement.
We'll cut the promo for the Appy League using that, I think.
Yeah.
And then finally, Ben, you got back to Winston-Salem for the first time. And how long has it been? 13 years or something
Yeah,
like that?
the one and only time I went to a Truist Stadium, home of the Winston-Salem Dash. There's so many Truists. I think they play in the stadium name. The first time I went there, well, when it was BB&T ballpark, that doesn't really matter, but it was 2011, and I've been back to North Carolina multiple times and was never avoiding the Dash, but just the way things worked out on the schedule had not made it back. So they had the distinction of any active team with the longest gap. So this trip, my two primary goals with the itinerary were to see Kinston in the final season and finally make it back to Winston-Salem. It worked out that, that was a Wednesday, so a more lower key day for them, but Brian DeAngelis, who used to be with the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs, he's the team president, GM there. I think he's doing a great job running that franchise with a lot of creativity. They got a lot of alternate identities. They have a chicken. They have one of their alternate identities, which we talked about on the show, is the Hype Hens, which kind of sounds like hyphens because Winston-Salem Dash and all that. The Dash is actually a hyphen, but they have the Hype Hens, a chicken-based identity, and they have a really nicely constructed chicken coop and chickens living at the ballpark. So I talked to Amber, who does stadium operations for them, and who is their kind of de facto chicken tender, as they say. It was pretty cool to see some live chickens at the ballpark and one of those little quirks. Their food was just out of control. And it was one of those situations, sometimes when I'm covering food, my designated eater, we just wander around, pick a couple things. It takes 2 innings, whatever. But we had so much food with the designated eaters, a guy named Seth Mendelson and his wife. Man, I need to write down names before I start talking. I meet so many people and then don't have instant recall of these names. But throughout like 5 innings, they just brought them more and more items. And one of the funniest things that happened was they brought out a dessert. There was so much food, so it was hard to keep track of it all. But they brought out a dessert called the Dirt Cup, which is chocolate pudding with Oreo crumbles, right? And then they're eating it and they're like, there's bugs in here. And at first I'm thinking like, oh man, like, ugh, that's not good. And then they're digging around, there's more and more bugs. And I'm like, what is going on here? And then it's the realization that the bugs are there on purpose. They were like freeze-dried, crispy, like grasshoppers, added for
It's
like,
dirt.
yeah, exactly, added for crunch. And it was part of the actual thing. But learning that in real time without knowing actually made it funnier than if we had actually known that that there was bugs in this dessert dish, the Dirt Cup. So that was pretty funny. I mean, they had like Cajun gator with like an aioli dipping sauce, a heart attack hot dog, which of course topped with pulled pork and bacon, and on and on. So much good food. Talked to some really interesting, fans. There's a 16-year-old kid I talked to who works, for the team, like in their warehouse, doing a lot of like loading, unloading type work. 16 years old. He also works like kind of with septic tanks and cleaning them out. He's like, it's a tough job. Someone's got to do it. He goes to school, and he is also Riley, the real deal Neal, local celebrity stock car racer at Bowman Gray. And I'd swung by Bowman Gray earlier in the day. I'm not really a racing guy, but it's like $12 to get in. Really rowdy atmosphere, I'm told. Old school throwback environment, and Riley's a third generation racer. He works for the Dash as one of his jobs, but he's like winning races at Bowman Gray at the age of 16. And I was like, man, I want to go back to Winston-Salem and see a race at Bowman Gray. It just seemed like such a unique atmosphere. And it was cool to talk to Riley, the real deal Neal, and I hope to write something up about him, as well as quite a few other people I talked to in Winston-Salem. I feel like I've been going on for a while, but of course, per usual, just scratching the surface. These trips bring so much, so much people to talk to, information to process. I got back yesterday, and I feel a little loopy right now, just trying to get back caught up and have a productive week next week, and be on the road again later this month. Oh boy.
I mean, you already teased us with this Durham story that we're going to have to return to next week. You understand this?
Yeah. Oh, we will. Designated Eater drama in Durham, North Carolina. Stay tuned.
I am excited to hear that one. Benjamin Hill, you can find all of his stuff, of course, at milb.com. And you can find Ben on social media at Ben's Biz and The Ben's Biz on Instagram. And we're going to talk some on-field trade deadline stuff, but Ben is going to rejoin us. He's going to go study all of the dudes in baseball history, because Name That Dude will wrap this up. So Ben's going to get on the dude studying train, and we'll catch him at the end. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, dudes.
Okay, real talk. After you buy a new house or a car, you're usually swirling in excitement. The pure joy mixed with a little bit of overwhelm because it's a big purchase, and really mixed in with that joy. The words that you want to be thinking about are, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. That's the phrase that will help you feel good knowing you have people who care to help you file a claim or find the coverage for the things that you want to protect. And listen, sometimes the topic of insurance can get a little bit overwhelming, but it really doesn't have to be complicated because, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. So with those big new purchases like that car, that house, you want to be thinking about long-term coverage and protect the things that you love. And the key here is being able to customize. State Farm has the options to fit your unique needs, which means you can talk to your agent to get the coverage you need and have coverage options to protect the things you value most. Plus, you can file a claim right in the State Farm mobile app and reach a real person when you need to talk to someone, which is super key these days. So when you need help protecting the things that matter most, remember to say, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
It's Odyssey's AI Minute presented by Oracle. Wouldn't it be nice to have more time? According to a new report from Thomson Reuters, 77% of professionals believe AI will have transformational impact on their work. AI is expected to save workers 4 hours per week by the next year and 12 more hours per week over the next 5 years. Just think about what you can do with those 720 minutes. AI may be the most important new computer technology ever, but AI needs a lot of processing speed, and that gets expensive fast. Upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. Do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic. Take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/AIBiz. oracle.com/AIBIZ.
Well, the trade deadline, as noted, is now in the books for the 2024 season, and maybe not the most earth-shattering, ground-shaking trade deadline that we've ever seen, but we did see a lot of prospects trading places, and we are going to discuss those prospects with our very own Sam Dykstra. Sam, I know the morning of the trade deadline, you posted on Instagram your big Dunkin' coffee. It doesn't seem like it was probably as insane of a day as it could have been for you guys by any stretch. I mean, we didn't see Tarek Skubal make a move. We didn't see some of the big names that we talked about going into the deadline. We did not see get moved, but there were still some top notable prospects who made their way into and moved along in their professional careers. Were there any things that stood out as like a theme for this year? I mean, I know it seems like some teams really overpaid for some talent, but there was not a lot that you really shook your head at and thought like, man, this team is shipping this dude out in exchange for this guy. There weren't a whole lot of those shocking deals. Is there anything that seemed like a theme this year?
Yeah, I mean, it felt like teams were paying high prices for relievers, for potential starters. We'll talk about the Yusei Kikuchi deal. That was the one that I guess took me most aback in terms of what the Astros were willing to pay in terms of prospects for a rental pitcher, a starter at that, mind you. But I think the dust kind of settled, and you look back at it, and you're like, well, listen, I know Robbie Snelling and Dylan Lesko are in our top 100 right now. They're going to drop out when we do our re-rank here in a few weeks. And so then you look at him like, there's not really a brand name prospect who has moved in this deal. Why is that? And I've kind of gone back and forth on it. And, part of me thinks that teams are prospect hugging in a way, like they're not willing to give up some of these real big names. And part of that is it's a good story to develop guys on your own and call them up. And, you were looking at like Jackson Merrill, what he's doing for San Diego, and Jackson Churio, and Bobby Witt Jr. is homegrown. Gunnar Henderson is homegrown. Like, teams like telling those stories and turning their best prospects into local superstars. But I think the other part of it is what you were saying, Tyler, like Tarek Skubal wasn't moved. It doesn't seem like that ever really came close. Garrett Crochet kind of killed his own leverage, or at least the White Sox's leverage, when he said, I'm not pitching in the postseason unless I get an extension, because he's already butting up against an innings limit. I get it from that point of view, but it makes it more difficult to trade at the deadline if you're the White Sox. So he doesn't get moved. Those would have been the two guys, I think, outside of like the guys in Toronto, right? Like Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Bo Bichette, maybe they would have gotten a true top 100 prospect, but the Jays, and this was indicative through their moves as well, still believe they can compete in 2025. So don't sell everybody. Don't do what the Marlins did. The Marlins moved anybody that they could get bites on. And now they have a more dynamic farm system as a result. So I think a lot of this was building out depth for certain teams. You look at the Rays, the Marlins, the Blue Jays, those teams really built out their farm systems a little bit more. But in terms of looking at like, hey, here's the one prospect who I think really makes this deadline, we're going to remember this deadline as this is when X was traded. It's not quite there for me.
Well, I think probably the team that we should start with is the Miami Marlins, who dealt a whole bunch of players away, not just at the trade deadline, but obviously even earlier this season. We're starting to ship guys out, with Luis Ariz going to San Diego the year. But the Marlins did bring back a ton of prospects. I mean, a glut of, what did they acquire? 16 prospects or something over like a 2-day span. And they have 3 of the top 6 ranked in the story that you got up on MLB Pipeline, with some of the best talent that was moved at the deadline, led by Connor Norby and Agustin Ramirez, in 2 separate deals, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, Connor Norby was somebody who was just blocked in Baltimore. He was that perfect example of the Orioles have too many position player prospects. They need to turn these into trades, or like, at least give these guys a shot. Connor Norby was up with the big club for a bit, but he gets moved for Trevor Rogers, who, isn't a great starting pitcher necessarily, but is a controllable one. And that's something Baltimore obviously values. So they move Kyle Stowers and Connor Norby. Agustin Ramirez comes over in the Jazz Chisholm Jr. trade. I really like that pickup. That's really fascinating to me. Ramirez, somebody with clear plus raw power, if not more than that. Just got to AAA. Some questions about how he's going to work as a catcher. Maybe he has to move over to first base. But guess who else they also picked up, who's a very powerful first baseman, and that's Davison De Los Santos in a deal with the D-backs. De Los Santos led the minors in home runs with 30 at my last check. Easily some of the best raw power in all of the minor leagues. Just has one of the worst approaches as well. I mean, I think he was swinging at pitches outside the zone more than 40% of the time. The guy is aggressive in search of that power. If he connects, it goes a long, long way. Part of him leading the minors in homers was helped by the fact that he played in Amarillo and Reno, which are 2 absolute launching pads, and the PCL in general is a launching pad. But getting Ramirez and De Los Santos in the same AAA Jacksonville lineup is really enticing to me. They add Adam Major, Jared Cerna, Graham Pauley. Peter Bendix, the new president of baseball operations with the Marlins, comes from the Rays, and the Rays have always valued a very deep farm system. You know, if when things don't work out at the top level or guys get too expensive, the Rays trade them away because they can plug that hole with a minor leaguer and a quality prospect. I don't know if the Marlins necessarily need to do that. I hope they are more willing to hold on to players for longer than the Rays have done. But they're building up the farm system to have that type of conveyor belt of talent. So you look at some of the pitchers that they already have: Thomas White, Noble Meyer from last year's draft, Max Meyer. They pick up Robbie Snelling from the Padres. They're going to have some work to do with him because his stuff is backed up. But last year, one of the best pitchers in all of minor league baseball. So it's definitely a more well-rounded system now. It's a more dynamic one. And I think that's what Peter Bendix was aiming for when he took this job and when he set out on what can we accomplish at the deadline.
Another team that really pulled in a lot of talent, the Florida Mates of the Miami Bay Rays, Sam, go out and they swap Jason Adams, they send Randy Arozarena to Seattle, and they brought back some good pieces as well. For Rays fans, Jason Adams goes to San Diego. They bring back Dylan Lesko, really talented arm there. They get Brody Hopkins from the Mariners, another really talented arm. The Rays are kind of in one of those transitional stages where they're still obviously a team that has a pedigree of reaching the postseason and figuring things out in recent years. And it just feels as though the Rays are always going to be in the hunt. Right now, they're 4.5 games back of a wild card spot. But for those moves, what do you like most about what the Rays were able to get back in return?
Yeah, I mean, one thing about the Rays going into this deadline, I think, is that they had really good upper level talent. Like they had a really solid big four, and Junior Caminero, who's consistently knocking on the door, just needs to be healthy this year. Carson Williams is probably a top 10 overall prospect at this stage. His strikeout rate has steadily improved this year at Double-A. Xavier Isaac, maybe my favorite first base prospect in baseball right now. Jack Caglianone putting him off to the side, but Xavier Isaac has tremendous raw power, and he's done a really good job of getting that to play in games. And Braden Taylor was their first round pick last year and has proven to be a really good hitter at third base or shortstop, depending on where you want to put him. It's probably at third base long term, but he's had a really solid first full year too. So they had a really good top four, and then I think it was less deep than the Rays are typically used to. Now it's significantly better. I mean, you get Lesko. Yes, he's going to be a reclamation project for them for sure, but one that, speaking to some Tampa Bay folks this week, they're really excited to get their hands on him. They really trust their pitching development group. They know it's the command that's the issue. The raw stuff is still there. So if they can harness it and get him not only just more in the zone, but like more on the edges of the zone, because at times he's been really hittable if he's throwing the ball dead red. So get him more on the black of the plate. They could really unlock something with Dylan Lesko. I really like those Mariners pickups for the Randy Arozarena trade. Brody Hopkins, we moved up pretty aggressively in the re-rank, or when we placed him after the trade. He might slip a little bit from there, but like I really like the stuff. He was a two-way player in college. Now he's pitching only. The fastball and slider, I think, are 2+ pitches. He has some command troubles himself, but man, I think they're getting him at the right time because he's got a big arrow up next to his name. And if you already have a guy who's like finding himself as he focuses more on his mound work, and you get him with that Rays pitching group, I think Brody Hopkins could be special for them. But Aiden Smith, only a 20-year-old at A-ball. Some hit tool questions with him, but like the power has been playing. He's a really good defensive center fielder, can really run. So that was another quality pickup. I don't know. This is just like a much deeper group. Even somebody like Hunter Biggie with the Rays, they got him from the Cubs in the Isaac Paredes deal. Most of the focus there was on Christopher Morel, getting him back. But like Hunter Biggie, he's not currently on the top 30. Part of me wishes I kind of snuck him on there because the quality of stuff is really good. He could just replace Jason Adam as one of their bullpen arms right away. And this is what the Rays do, right? If they lose somebody, they find a replacement. And in a few years, he's a trade candidate, or he's getting them to the brink of the World Series or the World Series itself, like we saw with them in 2020. So this felt like a very Rays deadline, and that they acknowledged, hey, we're not going to make the playoffs this year, but how can we get back to who we are with a deep system? And they certainly accomplished that.
All right, Sam, one of the lines that will resonate from this 2024 deadline is that Blue Jays Astros trade, in which Yusei Kikuchi goes to Houston, and the Astros sent a lot back to Toronto. Take us through the mechanics of that deal from your perspective, and what it means for the Jays now, being able to cash in, a good piece, but they got a lot back for Yusei Kikuchi.
They did. And the big thing for me in that trade is Yusei Kikuchi was a rental. So they weren't going to get anything for him if they lost him in the offseason. So you trade him now, but what are the Jays trying to do, right? They know they're in the prime of Bo Bichette and Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and they made a lot of acquisitions. I mean, just think a few months ago, right? They were going after Shohei Ohtani really aggressively, thinking this was going to be the year, and it hasn't worked out. But instead of blowing everything up, they're like, listen, let's just give ourselves a better crack at it next year. So we'll deal Kikuchi, but if we could get some pieces that are either major league ready or on the cusp of being major league ready, let's aim for that. And then to get Jake Bloss, who there have only been 3 pitchers from last year's draft to already make their major league debuts. One is Paul Skeens, who everybody knows. The other is Hurston Waldrop, another first-round pick. The other is Jake Bloss, who was pitching in Georgetown last year. Not exactly like a baseball factory, and was taken in the 3rd round. Now all of a sudden he's making major league starts for an Astros staff that is depleted by injuries, but like he earned that spot and those looks. He's kind of right on the cusp of the top 100 for me. We'll see how that shakes out here in a couple of weeks. But he's somebody who the Jays could plug in at the end of this year, and then going into spring next year, he's very easily could be their number 4 starter. And then he's controllable for years beyond that for like a few months of Yusei Kikuchi. Many people have said this. If it was Bloss for Kikuchi straight up, that would be a pretty good deal. And then you get Joey Loperfido, who's not a prospect anymore, but another outfielder with major league experience, somebody who would be ready for 2025. And Will Wagner, who, yes, son of Billy Wagner, gets traded away from the Astros. He's always been a really solid hitter throughout the minor leagues, a strong OBP type, not great power, but can certainly get on base and hit the baseball. And as a utility infielder type, he could be on their bench this time next year, kind of in that Spencer Horwitz role. The Jays keep on trucking. Yes, they made some other deals that I think are more for bench pieces. I do like Jonathan Clase, who they got for a reliever from the Mariners, but I think a lot of what the Jays were doing were trying to make sure, yes, let's deepen our farm system a little bit, but let's get guys who are going to help us try to get back into playoff contention next year. And it was pretty solid from that perspective.
All right, Sam, anybody else who really stands out as maybe below the radar or somebody who you've got an eye on that might not be the biggest headline person or prospect that may drive a lot of eyeballs at this stage, but somebody who was required that you really like?
Yeah, I'll just throw out there one other deal, which was the Lane Thomas deal from the Nationals to the Guardians. The Nationals obviously bring up James Wood, and Dylan Cruz is not far away. I think they were just striking at the right time. They also dealt away Jesse Winker from their outfield group. So they moved Lane Thomas to Cleveland, and the big arm they get back is Alex Clemmie from the Guardians. And the Guardians are pretty good at developing arms. But Alex Clemmie, coming out of the high school ranks in the draft last year, I think a lot of people believed in his upside. It's just, how can he control the ball? But it's a plus fastball with, pretty good stuff beyond that. And he's been getting strikeouts this year at single A. He's got 97 and 69 in the 3rd innings. So you add Clemmie to that really young pitching group rather for Washington. I mean, I really like Harleen Susana. He's broken out this year. He's always thrown triple digits, but this year he's really harnessing his control. Travis Socorro was another pick they got from last year's draft, 6'6". He was in the 3rd round. It's another plus fastball with a really good splitter and a workable slider too. Like, he could be a number 2, number 3 starter down the line. These guys are lottery tickets because they're so young, but I think adding Clemmie to Socorro and Susana ups the potential that Washington could have an ace out of this group. And that's huge for a team that's clearly in a rebuilding mode and pouring so much focus in the farm system. But adding Clemmie for this is, just another piece. And I think the Nats system right now, Wood will graduate in a few weeks, but this is kind of what they were hoping to build at some point. So adding somebody of Clemmie's caliber was a huge get for Washington.
Great stuff on the 2024 trade deadline from the legend himself, Sam Dykstra. And Josh Jackson, another legend, stops by with Goes to the Minors. Then we're back to wrap up the rest of the show on the other side.
When you're worried about underarm sweat and odor, it can be distracting. Like this. Or this. Or even this. It's time to silence those distractions with a spray of powerful Dove Men Plus Care Antiperspirant. Featuring our 72-hour protection and soothing 1/4 moisturizing cream. Because when you forget about your underarms, you can focus on being unforgettable. Dove Men. Forgettable underarms, unforgettable you.
This summer, get away in the Hyundai you've always wanted at the Hyundai Getaway Sales Event. Get the hottest deals of the season on many of our award-winning Hyundai models, which all come with America's best warranty. But get going, because these deals won't last. Add more joy to your journey at the Hyundai Getaway Sales Event. Get 0% APR for 60 months or up to $7,500 total savings on the Hyundai Ioniq 5. Hurry into the Hyundai Getaway Sales Event. Offers end September 3rd. Call 562-314-4603 for details.
We interrupt this podcast to bring you another thrilling edition of Ghosts of the Miners. Now, here's your correspondent and host, Joshua Jackson.
Welcome back to Ghosts of the Miners, in which all of you out there in Radio Land must identify the legitimate historical ball club or player hiding amidst the fraudulent pair. One once tried to pile up victories. The others could ever amass only questions. In the last segment, I asked you which of the following minor league baseball teams did at one time exist. A. The Tullamore Clovers. B. The Reedsville Luckies. C. The Mississippi Queen Aces. You made the fortunate choice if you picked B, the Reedsville Luckies, who took their chances in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s in the Carolina Bi- and Tri-State Leagues. But there's no 2 or 3 ways about it. The Luckies were lucky enough to make the playoffs in 4 straight seasons in which they finished 4th place, winning the whole shebang once. But they were not lucky enough to ever finish higher than 3rd place in the regular season over 14 non-consecutive years in the minors. The Reedsville Luckies moniker grew out of a now unfashionable crop. For decades and decades, the big business in Reedsville was the American Tobacco Company, parent corporation of Lucky Strikes. And the name has not gone up in smoke. It lives on today in the form of a summer collegiate team in the Old North State League. Baseball's very first Luckies were not. Nothing at all went right for the 1935 team of the Bi-State League. That club opened the year managed by outfielder Glenn Pick Biggerstaff, but it seems old Glenn should have picked a bigger staff to support him, as he was replaced at the helm midstream by L.J. Perry. And not even that prevented the inaugural Reedsville 9 from finishing 8th out of 8 with an unsightly 39-75 record. But after 6 seasons, the best of which was a 3rd place finish on the strength of Ray Scantling's unscant 33 home runs to lead the league in 1938, the Bi-State League was out of Luckies. As bleak as that run had been, the most grimly unlucky year for the Luckies was the season they were managed by Lee Gamble, when the Reedsville club was a very bad bet in the 1947 Tri-State League, going 45-92. The Luckies' fortune did turn around in the Carolina League from 1948 to 1956, especially during a 4-year stretch beginning in 1950, when they were in the middle of the pack every season but scraped into the playoffs and won the crown in 52 with hot stuff from utility man Walter Teapot Fry. But in 1955, the club had a new working agreement and became known as the Reedsville Phillies, and the next year it disbanded. And that's how the Luckies ran out. Now, on to the question for next time. Which of these players could really pitch it in the minors of yesteryear? A. Bill Knuckles. B. Rick Curves. C. Sam Changes. Want to know the answer? Put one over the plate. Or tune into the next Ghost of the Miners. But for now, you'll have to excuse me. My producer Ben Hill is going for the gold, and I've got to hide it.
Big thanks to Josh Jackson for swinging by as, the crowd just goes crazy for Josh week after week. I know they always sound similar, but the tens of thousands of unique audience members every week for Ghosts of the Miners, it's really quite remarkable and how much they love him. And we love him as well. So big thanks to Josh for stopping by. And before we get out of here on this week's episode of the Show Before the Show, it's time for the latest edition of Name That Dude. Sam has the dude for this week, which means Ben and I will be the guessers. Sam, lay out the dude's case for us.
All right. So this dude didn't spend a great amount of time in the minor leagues, but it does offer us an opportunity to remember some minor league affiliations and some other things along the way. So this dude was drafted in the first round of the 2003 draft. I'm going to withhold his place. It's not number one, so it's not that obvious, but his place and his college. Although I will say he was drafted out of college in 2003. We can save those for later clues. 2003, he went to the Arizona League at the time, very briefly. This is in the Brewers system, by the way. He was drafted by the Brewers. Only one game in the Arizona League, then went to 20 games in the Midwest League, which was a low A, single A, however you wanted to define it. Class A of the Beloit Snappers. In 2003, played 20 games with them, and then jumped to the majors.
Whoa!
In his draft year, played 7 games for the Brewers, got 14 plate appearances, struck out 6 times. So not the best debut, but he did debut in the majors in his draft year.
Wow!
I actually have a guess. I have a guess on. I do have a guess on this.
Let's just get through his next 2 years, and then we can lock in your guess. 2004, he played for Huntsville in the Southern League. Again, that was a Brewers affiliate at the time. The Huntsville Stars played 133 games for Huntsville. That was the only team he played for. Didn't get back to the majors that year. Had 8 homers, 11 steals, a 774 OPS. He was in the Arizona Fall League briefly in 2004 and in 2003. So he's a 2-time Fall Leaguer. He was a Futures Game participant in 2004 as well. 2005, played for AAA Nashville, 55 games, batted .320 with a 1090 OPS, had 12 homers in those 55 games, and played the bulk of the year with the Brewers, 96 games, batting .239 with a 727 OPS and 13 homers. So had 25 homers between Nashville and Milwaukee in 2005, and then basically was a major leaguer the rest of his career, mostly with the Brewers, some very quick time at the end with Seattle, Arizona, and Tampa Bay.
My initial guess, I'm realizing he would not have been drafted that early. He would have been more like 05, 06.
Well, who's your guess?
My initial guess was Matt Laporta, but it's not Matt Laporta.
It is not Matt Laporta, no.
How about Richie Sexson?
Not Richie Sexson. No, you're kind of dancing around it. You guys have the right idea in mind.
You said he was a college player.
It was a college player. This might be an even bigger hint, and a lot of people in Wisconsin are probably yelling at their podcast device right now. But he actually joined the major league staff this year, and it was a big to-do that this legendary Brewer, he's like a local legend, I would say. He played for them for a long time. Joined Pat Murphy's staff for the 2023 season. So for 2024.
Man. Yeah, I'm trying to think of
what's his name. Hall? Bill.
It's
Bill
not
Hall?
Bill Hall.
Okay.
Not Bill Hall. No. One guess for Bill Hall, but Bill Hall and this guy actually share the position.
I think I have a guess because I was recently reading about this dude when I did the Andre Dawson Classic. Is it Ricky Weeks?
It is Ricky Weeks.
Ricky Weeks.
Honestly,
Weeks, one of the all-time greatest college baseball hitters, a Golden Spikes Award winner. He batted. What did Ricky Weeks bat in college? I think his career average in college was like 419 or something absolutely preposterous. Yeah,
this is
Ricky
one of the
Weeks,
reasons why I withheld. Yeah, his draft position and his school. He went to Southern. And
Ricky Weeks made the jump to the big leagues in his professional debut. That is insane.
Yep.
Holy cow. Yeah, Ricky Weeks. Wow. Ricky Weeks, 41 years old now. Let's see if there is So he was the 2003 Golden Spikes Award winner because in 2003, he batted .479 and he finished his career with a .465 college batting average. I thought I was joking when I was like, 416, 465. In college, he went 254 for 546 and won the Golden Spikes Award in 2003. Also the Dick Hauser Trophy in 2003. That is insane.
Is that off of Wikipedia?
It is. It is. It sure is. Ricky Weeks was a fun player. I liked Ricky Weeks.
He was. He very much was. And I don't know why he came to mind exactly for this week, but no, a fun one to revisit. And exactly I love when guys stick around. And, you know, like everybody in Milwaukee has fond memories of Ricky Weeks. And now for him to be so close to that team and teach those guys, you know, they're having a good season. I think about like Jackson Churio spending his rookie year there, getting to learn from Ricky Weeks and somebody who's been through that environment is perfect fit.
Yeah. Wow. 754 plate appearances in 2010. It's hard to come up to the plate that many times.
Yeah. Yeah. And 651 of those were at bats. Those were both led the league. And he OPS'd 830. That is pretty damn good. He was also hit by pitches 25 times that year. And he was an all-star the following year in 2011. Man. Yeah. Good career, Ricky Weeks. 14-year big league career. And I had completely forgotten that he made the jump from A-ball to the big leagues in his debut season. That's incredible. That's a good one. That was a good dude. A good dude this week. Ricky Weeks on Name That Dude here on this week's episode of the Show Before the Show. All right. Well, that'll do it for this week's episode. Huge thanks to Josh Jackson for stopping by and to all of the characters in North Carolina. I'm very anxious to read about the drama in Durham with the designated eaters. And for Benjamin Hill, Sam Dykstra, Josh Jackson, and all the rest, my name is Tyler Maughan. Thanks for tuning in to the Show Before the Show. We'll catch you next week.